Perfect. All right, good morning, everyone, and thanks for tuning into this morning's Process Automation webinar series. My name is Philip Blanks, and I'm going to be your host this morning. Today, we're going to show you how to streamline your time off requests through our process automation software. So really quickly, as a reminder, the webinars in these series are only about 30 minutes long, so you'll be able to see a demo on how you can improve your business processes through automation software and quickly get back to your busy schedules. So before I jump into the presentation, just a quick reminder that I want to make sure that everyone is aware that the audio for the presentation is being broadcasted through your computer speakers right now. So if you experience any difficulties with your audio or your video, send a quick chat to the host, which is myself, and I'll help you out. And to answer your questions, we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So feel free to submit your questions at any time in the chat panel, which is going to be located to the right of your screen. And if we are not able to get to your question during the Q&A panel, we'll reach out to you afterwards to make sure that we can get your question answered. So now I will go ahead and turn it over to our Director of Solution Architecture, Cliff Babbitt, so he can begin the presentation on automation for your HR processes. Welcome, Cliff.
Good morning. Thank you, Philip. As Philip said, we'll be going through an overview of the time off request process and how FastFlow can help automate that for many organizations. So first, I'll talk about a few of the categories that we might address in Formfast. One is the form types, various options for submitting time off requests, from standard vacation time requests to Americans with Disabilities Act accommodations, family medical leave. All of those can have their own process associated with them. So they may be individual forms, they may be specific processes that we want to send through different routes. So we'll talk a little bit about the customization of the forms and the routing options that we can create in an online process where those forms can be filled out by managers, by employees, and submitted through an approval process that can be customized for the organization. That can be the submission itself of the form. We can integrate that into an intranet where the employees can access those forms online, submit them through a process. It can also be policy review process where we're looking at a checklist of things that we need to do for Family Medical Leave Act. It may be different process for military versus non-military employees. All of those considerations may be things that we want to build out in a more formalized electronic process, so that transition when new HR employees come on board, those processes can be more seamless for users, as well as the review and processing of those from an HR perspective. And the approvals and denials, we also want to allow the users to quickly authenticate their forms, validate those in a process online where they can submit them and pass them on, or attach appropriate documentation along with that request. So first, a little bit about FastFlow. FastFlow is a web-based tool that captures data and uses it to automate workflows and generate dashboards and reports. So it's not just submission of the forms, but we can now extract that data and make it useful for users in the process, as well as those who aren't necessarily involved, HR managers, directors that want to see from a bird's eye view what's going on without being directly involved with the process. FastFlow leverages pure, powerful browser-based technology that allows your completion and submission of the forms on a wide range of devices, from touchscreen PCs and slates to Android tablets and iPads. It's really a flexible platform that's usable anywhere throughout an organization. It also supports integration with hospital login protocols that allow seamless authentication with Active Directory, for those of you who are familiar with that process, and that can actually drive user functionality and features. So we know the context of who's logging in and provide to them what they need to see in real time. Today I'm going to be talking mostly about processes and HR accommodations and leave of absence. And again, FastFlow is web-based, so we can use that through virtually any device using Internet Explorer or Chrome. It supports integration on the front end from hospital intranets, so we can launch forms in context or go into categories of forms. So we can launch this on an intranet, having a hyperlink that goes into a category of HR forms, or it can be more broadly applied where there's a hyperlink just into the Formfast application. But beyond that, we can also tie into data in HRIS or time card systems, so that we can pre-fill forms with user information to sort of streamline that process so they're not manually entering that data every time they open a form. Electronic forms can then be routed anywhere they need to go, maintaining an audit trail, generating notifications, and allowing users to quickly complete their tasks online. It provides some visibility into that process as well for the users who submit them, so that it's not a sheet of paper that's sort of behind a wall. They can see where it is at any given point in time. And it also allows not only the users, but manager and HR professionals to monitor metrics and performance indicators in real time, so they can see how they're performing on certain things. A couple of examples that we have here today. I'm just showing a request for non-military family medical leave and an ADA accommodation request form. These are some standard forms that we have content for. Customers can license pre-designed forms, but a lot of our customers will create their own custom forms. And FastFlow allows you to import forms from a number of different formats. If you're familiar with it at all, you can bring in forms from PDF or Word and convert them into online fillable format, so that you can activate checkboxes, free text fields, but also enable drop-down menus on the forms as well. Standard forms like these, the FMLA and AMA accommodation requests, can be presented in a familiar format. So if users are used to the look and feel of those forms, those will be easy to transition to an electronic format. But we can also create facility-specific forms and customize the entry of data on those as well. I talked a little bit about the pre-fill of data on the form. We can do this in a couple of different ways. One, tying into the user who's logged in. If I'm requesting some time off, I may be submitting the form in context. The system knows who I am. FastFlow logs me in automatically and knows some detail about me, what department I work in, obviously today's date, and those values can now be pre-filled on the form, so it's a lot simpler for the user who's submitting that. They don't have to necessarily fill out a lot of information that's redundant, that's already been captured before. So that can be streamlined for them. And we also can go out to external databases and pre-fill data from other tables. So if it's a human resources database, managers might be able to go out and search for an employee name and pre-fill some information about their employee. Likewise, human resources may be able to go out and access data from other sources to pre-fill the form. Again, making that much simpler to fill in a lot of information on a form. As I'm completing a form, I may also have options for drop-down text that can be customized. In these particular examples, there's not a drop-down list available, but we could customize types of time off that you might be requesting in a form, or reasons why I'm requesting that. And we might do that for standardization of that data. We may want to prevent users from putting information onto a form that's irrelevant for us. So if we're requesting time off, we might say, this is for family medical leave or disability. That can be driven by a drop-down list that restricts what they put in that field. And that does a couple of things. It adheres to policies and procedures for the organization, ensures that that data is appropriate and valid, but it also allows you to standardize that or normalize it for data reporting. So if we're running reports on that later, we don't have a pie chart with 50 different elements in it. It can be, just show me all of the different types of requests, whether military or non-military. So all that data now can be useful for us. But we can also allow users to digitally sign the forms, and as they do that, it'll embed their name and potentially a date and time along with that as well. All of that, again, driven off of the user's login credentials so that we know, we already know who they are and don't need to have them physically sign the form. They can do that digitally. The process for this may be even the most important aspect of redesigning workflows in a digital environment. FastFlow allows us to customize the process to meet simple or complex routing requirements. What I'm showing here, the Visual Workflow Designer, it's an easy-to-use web-based tool for designing workflow routes. This is something that users with a little bit of technical aptitude can easily go in and create or modify workflow routes without having to have programming a background or a lot of technical aptitude. So they can go on, you could even have departmental users administering some of these workflows. And in this example, we're sending a request from an initiator to her manager, and that can be configured to automatically route it to a specific person, a group, department, or even automatically determine the recipient based on some content in the form. So in some large organizations, we may say if it's an ADA request, it's going through a certain process that's slightly different than an FMLA request. It might be the same, but there might be even content on the form where we're saying if it's a military request, it's going to be processed slightly differently, and maybe somebody different is going to receive that. So we can look at the content of the form and determine where it needs to go. We can also allow users to select where that needs to go within a department. If there are examples where the submitter needs to make that determination, we're sending it to somebody in her department, whether she has multiple managers or needs to just send it to somebody in HR and make a decision on the fly. We can do ad hoc routing there as well. One other process that's not particularly highlighted in the time off is group routing, where we might have a group of people in a committee that are approving a form. This may be more for process changes in HR, where we want to send it to an HR committee and then have a group approval rating on those forms to allow it to go on to the next process. We might set a threshold of 60 or 70% of that committee needs to approve it before it goes on to the next step in the process. And all of that can be, it just gives us the flexibility to create very customized routes. We can also have options for signatures, attachments on the forms, notes, all sorts of things that allow us to specify in the workflow when and where those digital signatures are applied, where we prompt users for notes and attachments. Also, as we talked about earlier, part of the key is getting information or data out of this process. We can have customized step actions that allow us to drive content to other places beyond this. We may say that the form itself needs to be archived to a document imaging system, or perhaps it just needs to go into a file structure somewhere. But we can get even more advanced and say at a certain step in the process, maybe we're sending out a very nicely formatted HTML email to someone, or we're putting data in an external database. But it gives us some flexibility to tie into other processes outside of even some of our standards, like notifying users through their email that a workflow process is in their inbox. In FastFlow, we can also create custom applications. In this example, human resources, we have a dashboard that's fairly simple for this user, just to show how many workflows are active at a certain point in time. We can see a list of all of the in-flight workflows, but this could also be tailored to show a number of different options. We could have multiple dashboards that showed family medical leave requests that haven't been approved yet, and we may want to pull some data out of that to show on a dashboard, like the submission time or the reason for the request, and show that on a dashboard for somebody to see across the organization so they can make decisions on changes for that process in the future. We can also tie in document management and have our own content management for customers who do not have a preferred resting place for these forms. We can take that content and store it permanently in our archive for HR professionals to go in and retrieve that content when they need to. So we could store that for per year policies for 5-10 years after that content has been saved online, and allow users to go in and search by metadata values to retrieve that, and that could be any value potentially on the form that we want to use to index that. The type of leave, time off, when it was approved, who the sender and the approvers were, all of that content now can be useful for storage and retrieval. A little bit more on dashboard and reporting. We can create custom reports or tie this data, put this data in locations where it's standardized and can be used with other reporting tools. We've had Formfast customers have used FastFlow to just tie into Excel pivot tables and display some of the data that they've got stored in a database, or they may be using Crystal reports or other third-party tools to report against that. But we may also be serving up these reports in FastFlow. We can push data to folks when they need it. That is, maybe we schedule a report every Monday to send out some data to a handful of folks who need to see how many time off requests there have been in the last week or month. And we can also allow users to pull that data when they need to. It can be in the form of a report like we see here, where it's a pie chart showing me just a quick breakdown of what types of requests I'm getting in, but it could also be a dashboard with some more customized elements where we can color code values on the form to say maybe for certain requests that come in, time off requests for disability may have a different turnaround time expected than other types of requests coming in. We could color code those so that they're approaching a due date that we could calculate. It could show up on a dashboard in a different color, and as we're getting 5 days past submission, maybe it turns yellow. 10 days past submission, it turns red. All of those values could be customized, but ensure that the data stands out to the users when they go to access that. So with that, it's a high-level overview of FastFlow and how that could be used for different time off requests, including ADA accommodations, family medical leave. We've got a number of standard forms that we can provide for our customers, as well as quickly importing and modifying existing forms for optimization on an online fillable workflow where we can submit that through an automated process. But now I'll go ahead and turn it over to see if there are any questions from those of you who have participated.
Thanks, Cliff. There was one question that came in. Can this be accessed on an iPad? I guess talk a little bit more about the mobile component.
Absolutely. It is built in HTML5, so it is accessible through Chrome on any device. So iPads can access this. Today, we do not have a native iPad or iOS application. That's something that we are considering. It may be, in the future we'll have a wrapper for that in the App Store, so you could go in and log in and have some more controls in that environment. But today you can go in on an iPad and access these forms. For those of you who are familiar with or have seen FastFlow before, we originally had a requirement to use a PDF viewer, a third-party viewer from Adobe, and we embedded the PDF viewer in our application a couple of releases ago to allow that portability on iPads and Android devices. So yes, that is something you could use. I would caution that maybe smaller devices might not be optimal for this because we are presenting an entire form. An iPad does look pretty good. You could probably still use it on an iPhone. I have used it on mine, but the forms get kind of small and tougher to fill out. But on some of the larger handheld phones now, the 6 Plus and some of the Android phones are very large, and it's probably up to the user to determine whether their eyes can manage that or can see the form well when it's shrunk down on something like that.
Okay. I don't see any more questions, so so we'll just go ahead and move along. There will be a box for questions and suggestions at the close of this presentation. So if you did not get a chance to ask yours now, or if you think of something later, there will be a chance to do that at the close of the presentation. So the next webinar in the series, which is going to be July 14th, is going to be Automation for Your Lab Request. The registration link for these will be at the landing page once you close the session. You'll also find a link to request a more personalized demo for those that would be interested in that. And you'll also be able to view the most recent webinars and case studies. And just a quick reminder to everyone else, this recording for the webinar will be sent out to everyone once it's finalized. So feel free to share the link with your colleagues. And with that, I would like to thank everyone again for attending, and we'll see you next month.